next 5 years? The second question is there any plan to liaise with other departments such as the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development to look at promoting tourism within their sector in supporting rural economies? The third question is what strategy does your department put in place in driving transformation in the sector? And the fourth question is what is your department doing in making sure that it has access to information about tourism destinations in municipalities? Those are the four questions, Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. I will be taking over questions from members of the Portfolio Committee from the NA side. I will start with Honorable Keko, followed by the Honorable De Freitas, followed by Honorable Mutika, and then followed by Honorable Sitole, and then I will move over to other members. Can these four members start, starting with Honorable Keko? Ma'am?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I think I'm audible enough.
Yes,
let me first start. Chairperson, I just want to say the leadership of tourism and that the leadership of SAT has been meeting tourism stakeholders during this COVID-19 environment. I just want to know what issues have been discussed or what did the industry raise. Why I asked Chair is because of some of the establishments where you are used as quarantine sites and that leaves them with a stigma. What interventions is SAT and the department through the minister? What intervention are they thinking about? Because there is a huge stigma around the establishments being used as quarantine sites. That was not wrong because businesses were closed. They were taking opportunity of the situation, but there is stigma around that. I'm also thinking of the 200 million tourism relief fund, which SAT will be involved in. My question is, will they be working through or working with the panel of experts as said by the minister? Can we as a committee expect feedback from them? Can they also mobilize more resources for this intervention because the industry has been hugely affected during the lockdown? My other question would be, what lessons have they learned during this lockdown period? Aren't they thinking of putting more effort and more resources on domestic tourism, given the lessons that they have learned? I am also proposing continuous research as the environment will be changing given the situation, because now there is COVID-19, we don't know what will be there next time. I think I wanted just to raise those things, Chair. Let me close by saying when they are presenting, I heard the CEO talking about secondary cities. Can we also talk about other things like secondary cities, small towns, whatever, up to the villages? And we don't only want to hear them saying that. We in future, we need that written down in black and white. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. It's great to be back. I will be muted all this time. First of all, thank you to the CEO and to the acting chair for the presentation, for the comprehensive one. I want to also just thank the CEO. I see he has been consulting with a number of stakeholders, through webinars and so forth, many of which I have attended and observed. If he, when he reports back to the committee, just tell us some of the main findings that he's got from these webinars. From my perspective as an observer, it certainly seemed very interesting and some good information. I do have a few questions, but I just want to make a comment, and then perhaps when the minister responds a little bit later, maybe she can just incorporate it because it is bearing on the questions I have to the CEO. And that is, I see that on occasions in both a few presentations in previous meetings, there has been the re-emergence of tourism, the startup of tourism again, and essentially it says that it'll really just start by the end of the year. So if the minister could then just give us a feedback on how they reached those conclusions, and what information was used, what data was used to reach those conclusions, and how they came up with this plan. Then just to ask the CEO, and he may not have the answers immediately, because some of it is possibly too early or premature to find the answers immediately, and perhaps he could then tell us when he'll be able to send us the information. The first is, it talks about in the presentation about a domestic tourism growth strategy, and it did talk about in the annual report, alluded to that, but there was a detail missing. So I'm presuming it's because it's too early and perhaps you're gathering data, including information from webinars. But perhaps if the CEO could unpack that. And I want to just specifically ask the following in relation to that, and that is, what, if any, plans or interactions will there or have there been with local governments and provincial governments? Because the reason why I'm mentioning that is because the reality is that the department nor SAT can possibly go and roll out the potential for tourism in what the committee calls, dorpies and townships, and going right to the very ground of where people are, giving those people opportunities to develop tourism businesses. Only way I see it is that this can only happen through provincial and local governments. So if the CEO could perhaps just talk about that, and how would that be rolled out? Surely their participation and involvement would be very important. The other point that I found interesting was talking about new markets, which makes sense. Obviously, COVID has changed the whole scenario. How are these new markets being identified that will benefit most for South Africa? Not what emotionally we should be going, what markets we should emotionally be going to, but economically and job creation-wise, we should be looking at. So I'd be interested in that. And there was in the presentation, I don't have it in front of me now, but it did talk about a campaign with regards priority markets. So if that could just be discussed. It does mention the presentation that was handed to us, spoke about Nigeria, China, and India. And perhaps that could be explained why those particular markets. And in my mind, there are a lot of other markets that are missing. So perhaps you could just tell us a little bit more about that. And then, I just want to just double check that I have all of it. Yeah, I think that encompasses it. Thanks very much. Oh, sorry, one other point is that the grading, the CEO did talk about that, and if you could just talk about a little bit more about that, because I still believe, and I sense that the committee, although we haven't officially, agreed as a committee, the agreement I sense is that actually everybody in the sector should be graded and should be able to join it, not have to have any fees attached, in that regard, which is where the problem is at the moment. And when you're talking about a one-person show in a township, a few £100 even is a lot of money to pay, to a grading organisation. So if that could be discussed as well. Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks for your indulgence.
Thank you, Honourable Defreitas. Honourable Mutika. Honourable Mutika.
Yes, Chairperson, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible enough.
Thank you very much. Chairperson, let me start by welcoming the presentation and also welcoming the CEO because it's the first time we are meeting him. And also welcoming the reappointment of the DG. And Chairperson, let me remind everybody that the philosophy agreed by this committee is that let the existing structures and other oversight this nation not be abandoned, be supported to continue, but the more focus should go to the neglected areas like villages, townships, and the small towns. But when you listen to the presentation of the department yesterday and today, you hear less of those areas the committee is focusing on. And then we must deep and go and search if really it's there or it's not there. To me, we are not taken serious. But let me go through my questions, Chairperson. Since the international market is off now, nothing is happening, I want to know how many jobs have been affected by this because of the COVID-19? How many jobs have been affected by this removal of all international trips or anything to do with the international market? And again, in monetary form, how much did the organization lose so far? And we go down to the issue of 200 million again, Chairperson. How many people have been paid up to now? And where are those people coming from? Can we count some from the villages, townships, and the small towns as a focus of the committee? Can we count that some businesses from those poorest, neglected areas benefited out of these 200 million? Because we don't want to talk slogans, we want to see implementation of what you're talking about. And again, Chairperson, these job losses because of COVID-19 and in the international arena, can we classify them in terms of race, gender, and age, so that we can know who is more affected by this thing? Which new transformation destinations are going to be done or improved in the villages, townships, and small towns? Chairperson, let's talk about the ownership of the tourism attractions in destinations. Previously, we have noted that the black ownership was at less than 48%. And then the black women ownership was at 10%. How are they going to drastically address this? Because we don't want to come next year and then we're still getting the same figures. What drastic measures are they going to do to make sure that the women, black in particular, ownership is growing and is lifted? And Chairperson, let me also applaud the IT people today, because the audio is so good, and then we can communicate. Unlike yesterday, where half of the presentation we didn't hear. So, and then many members never even participated in this thing, and it is unacceptable. But I don't want to repeat what you have alluded yesterday, Chairperson. But it was very disappointing. Today, they've done well, and I think the quality is so good. Thank you, Chairperson, and I think I'll get answers. Thank you.
We'll move over to Honorable Sithole, followed by Honorable Gomba. Honorable Sithole.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Did you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. First of all, I want to thank the presentation, the Minister and the Deputy Minister for the work well done on this presentation. But my concern is that, Chairperson and the committee, is that the international tourism is closed until February 2021, as the international flight remain grounded. And this will impact negatively on the 2023 target of 21 million arrival by 2020. And the other issue, Chairperson, is that one of the domestic tourism season is closed until December 2022. So what I want to find out from the entity and the department, is there any cooperation activities that they have with the private sectors? If they do have, what are the details? And the other, Chairperson, is that one of what system is in place that will give the sectors the kickstart, because it means that they must have a proper program that will kickstart for after this epidemic. And the other, Chairperson, is that one, the entity, do they have any mechanism or system to lobby the government for the operating of domestic and international tourism, so that they must be opened? Because it seems that if they are not opened, our department, which is tourism, is going to be affected a lot, because it's the one that is already been affected. And the other, Chairperson, is that one for the international tourism. What I am trying to get is any system that is talking to the international tourism. If there is any, what are the details of it? If not, why not? And the other, Chairperson, the issue that is actually paining me or other members is that one of the issues of persons above 60 to 65 years. Because according to the information, they says they are on a higher risk of infections by this pandemic. So what I'm trying to get here, Chairperson, is that what the entity is doing, or what are they planning for those people who will be affected, especially if they want to go to hotel or to go to BNB, because it seems that they are going to be affected a lot. And the last one, Chairperson, is that one what I want to find out. They never say anything about the sanitation of their properties, especially hotels and BNB. What are the position of the entity? And the last one, Chairperson, which is the mission and the vision of the committee about this issue, which Honorable Ntika alluded to, the other honorable members from the NCOP, about the issue of failing, because it means that the department are failing to have a program that will talk to villages, township, and smaller towns. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Sithole. Honorable Gomba, Melina, are you in, Honorable Member?
Yes, I am in. Am I audible?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes,
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, my question is going to be based on the administration part of the presentation, because the CEO actually dealt more on the administration and explaining the spread of the 189 staff throughout the country. So my first question is going to be about the monitoring and evaluation tool that the department has in order to ensure that the 28 KPIs of the APP targets are met. Because if there is no monitoring and evaluation tool, we'll still experience the non-performance and still experience the quarterly reports which have targets which are not met. So we definitely, I still feel that we need to have the monitoring and evaluation tool that can be actually put in front of us to see that there will be performance indeed. Number two, I want to find out about their appraisal system for their performance management system. The appraisal system that is talking to performance, because I know in government, most of the departments, they will put aside money for performance, which is like a bonus for those ones that have actually met the target. Does the policy do you have a policy that is actually speaking to the performance management system? And does your policy allow the department to pay people bonuses of performance even when they did not perform? Nah, that's my question. Because I believe that if you didn't perform, you don't deserve to have the appraisal performance bonus. So those are my questions, because I believe that these 189 staff, we need to find and see performance from each, and performance, not only performance, but also commitment to ensure that whatever the committee is actually requesting to see, like we've been talking about township, dorpies, and villages, are we having that also in the plans so that your APP must also cover, including your KPIs? We must also monitor if they cover those dorpies, those townships, as well as those villages. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Gomba. Honorable Krombok will be followed by Honorable Mieni, and then Honorable Hlanganani Gumbi, followed by Honorable Peter. Honorable Krombok.
Thanks, Chair. I'm covered by Honorable De Freitas at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Krombok. Honorable Mieni. Honorable Mieni, are you in? If not, Honorable Hlanganani Gumbi.
Thanks very much.
We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, sorry. You'll just excuse me if some parts in the presentation were covered. I was in the sitting in Parliament, and when I was driving back, obviously I was trying to listen as best as I could with the signal. But I obviously just want to also greet the CEO who we haven't greeted. And I think that the thinking around post-COVID life is obviously important. And I think all countries are going to be doing that, especially countries which are fighting for a space in the tourism sector. And in particular, once all international travel begins to pick up, there's going to be a lot of competition for tourists in the space in which, because there will always be that first influx of tourists who are traveling around the world or domestically. And what I just want to understand is, what is the readiness for the first wave, or that first preparation for whether it's a campaign of sorts to basically be able to send the message out there that South Africa is safe and we are ready to host tourists? So in a sense, what you want to do is actually to be the champion of your entire sector, so that you're able to build quickly that demand and bring them into the country. And I want to know, do you have something prepared for that, to have that initial boost, or some kind of that initial campaign to be able to do that? That's the first thing. The second thing, which I've touched on previously in the setting, is around the cost of flying. Now across the world, all these airlines are grounded, and these airline companies are losing billions of rand. They're not going to be able to. Many of them are going to be dependent on bailouts, even private ones, on bailouts from their governments. But an airline company may receive a bailout from a government, but they will probably still have significant costs which they need to overcome. So therefore, costs for tourists themselves to be able to do exactly that, to go about, to visit, to spend money, is going to be quite exorbitant. And I wanted to know, will there be a coordinated effort with greater focus to make sure that from the side of able to bring down that cost as far as possible for people who are coming into the country, into South Africa? Because there may not be an incentive for necessarily to reduce the costs to go to South Africa, but there might be incentives to go elsewhere. And I think that this specific spots, which we have spoken about for some time, needs specifically greater attention. And I understand that in tourism that you have to leverage off other departments, but there has to be necessarily a coordinated plan coming from the tourism side. I am really big on going digital in the space, in the sense that that's the way people nowadays are consuming, especially the kind of people who become the major clients within tourism, are consuming information and changing their lives and changing their lifestyles and the way in which they think and do things. So, and I think the CMO even knows the efforts I've put into pressurizing the SAT to be able to go and market, for instance, quite significantly on digital platforms, and using the special ways in which digital platforms use influencers and all sorts of other things which influence human behavior. And I heard you speak about going digital in terms of your operations, for instance, which is one component of it, to reduce costs and to be in line with COVID-19 life. But I didn't hear too much, and give me if you did speak to it, but I didn't hear too much necessarily on going digital in terms of how do you sell South Africa as a space that attracts tourists to be able to come. And I'm pressing on this point which I've pressed on before, because I'm sure that with the advent of this pandemic, there's been greater thoughts given to that and how we are able to expand on that to reap better benefits. The last two things that I wanted to ask is the DG can't be with us today because he is dealing with the legal matter around restaurants being able to open or not. Now, I didn't know all the background around that, but there has been a sentiment, obviously probably boosted by the announcements from the religious sector around, for instance, places such as restaurants. You know, I think that was one of the places which was ironed out in the public debate. And I would want to get a view from the minister. She see restaurants being able to really open up again in the full sense of the word, and ways in which they do so. And I give an example. So, I mean, I have some thoughts, for instance, looking at what Spurs said in their statement, that they are unable to open up unless they're able to supply a full range of food and alcohol. The question is that the alcohol, for instance, have we been pushing a view as to say that perhaps maybe not only just food can be able to be transported to people, but food and alcohol? This allows us, for instance, to be able to open up some restaurants in a safe way that they're able to begin operating, and people who obviously, many of them are low-income workers who don't have jobs, are able to get back to work. So I would just like to get a view on that, and that view is probably going to come more from the minister. And the last thing, which is more of a comment, just touched by Honorable De Freitas, was around the issue of grading. And there was mention of it at the last portfolio committee meeting, where I think, I can't remember who said that grading is not too expensive. In fact, that there are incentives which reduce the cost to about 90% or so. And I think, and that's not kind of the read that I get from the committee around the issue of grading. The reading I get from the committee around the issue of grading, or at least that's I support, is that grading should be free but compulsory. It should be free but compulsory, and there are net benefits to that. The fact that it's free, an institution paying 500 Rand, 1,000 Rand is a lot of money in the context of a very small business trying to make, trying to get started or to make some money. But the benefits as well is that you, even as a department, have a better lay of the land, and we're able to make sure that places are properly graded so that even with tourists are able to see where the places that they're going to are of a certain standard in terms of 5-star or 4-star or 3-star or whatnot, and they know that, the money that they are paying is worth it, and there isn't any kind of bad news or repercussions, which when they go back to different countries, especially in a digitalized world, can have very, very bad effects for the South African tourism sector. So that is the feeling that I got. You can make some comments on that, but thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Hlanganani. Honorable Peter. Is Honorable Peter connected? If not so, Honorable Supra, can I hand over to you? I don't know if the chair is connected now.
Yeah, no, I've been connected. The problem is that the network is weak. So I think what you can do is for you to put across your points, Honorable Makubela.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Mine, Chairperson, is to just appreciate the fact that since we met with SAT on the I think it was on in our last portfolio committee meeting on the 17th of March, we have been able to see that all the points that we have put forward in terms of reigniting demand, reworking the strategy of tourism, looking into the future post-COVID, have been taken into account into the APP and the strategy of the entity. Ours would be just to ensure that, as they correctly say, that they are repositioning and repurposing tourism for the new and after COVID tourism sector, is to ensure that they are able to put in targets that will be targets that they will be able to meet as the entity. And then also to look into the policy space. The policy space of the entity is, I don't want to overemphasize the point on grading, that talks to the quality assurance and talks to visitor experience, because grading rests in the entity. To say perhaps after this pandemic, we must have worked into that policy space to ensure that grading becomes compulsory, but also it becomes free, or there are benefits to grading, so that more establishments would be able to fully grade. The other issue that I would want perhaps the entity and the department to package and work on is around the TOMSA levies, to look into the scheme to ensure that more establishments or more tourism products pay into this levy, so that this scheme can be able to ensure that it pulls up even those tourism products that are marginalized and those that are in rural and townships. They are able to cross-subsidize using these levies. Perhaps looking into the future would be to say, perhaps maybe the department and the entity must look into how they are going to rework and remodel TOMSA levies. That's it for me, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Makhubela. In case I get cut, take over again and run and conclude the meeting.
Okay, Chairperson.
Honorable members, we must just thank the SAT for the presentation. On a lighter note, I just hope that people who are arguing for alcohol consumption, one day they can also argue for smoking of marijuana. Because when you assess, these people who are arguing for alcohol consumption will be your anti-marijuanist people, if you are to ask them one by one. That was in passing. Minister and SAT, the advantage we have, one of the advantages is that almost the entire world is affected by COVID-19. It means that, that's why I like the strategy of SAT. What it means is that tourists internationally, they will not be able to say, I can go to this country and that country because this one is safer than that one. So what will count in the minds of the tourists will be two things. It is what we are doing now to deal with COVID-19 and our plan post-COVID-19. So I think SAT is on track to say they want to do necessary rejuvenation and repositioning of tourism in the country and strengthen communication on what we do now, what we intend to do post-corona, so that when tourists choose countries they want to visit, South Africa must be uppermost. Linked to that, variables that will be important will include how do we address their anxiety? How do we address their security? And as you said, Minister, yesterday, security will no longer just be physical. It will also be about how do we help them to make sure that they don't contract the virus post-corona. The kind of comfort we will want to create. So I think the strategy speaks to that. What will be important is for us to make sure that we implement it aggressively, but also make sure that we communicate it consistently. The second point is on risk. Based on our strategy, that will be affected by airlines. The airlines are ailing, the airlines are collapsing. Some of the airlines will not be in business. So what I want to suggest to SAT is that, yes, we want to look at the entire world to come to South Africa, but let's bear in mind that not only South Africa, but the rest of the airlines will be affected by COVID-19 financially. Therefore, when we make projections on the number of people we think will visit South Africa, let's make sure that one of the scenarios we are going to be looking at is the worst case scenario of having airlines collapse all over the world and therefore tourists not being able to come to South Africa. That's where I support your approach that says, at the same time, we support the strengthening and the repositioning of domestic tourism. And I want to link my next point to this point about domestic tourism. Our domestic tourism will succeed if we can, for instance, when you look at the report from SAT in the APP, there is Nigeria representatives. We also have Angola. So in the African continent, it's only Nigeria and Angola in the plan. I want to suggest to SAT Minister that Because of the risk that we face that may arise from the airlines and the risk that may emerge from anxiety coming from international tourists, let us up our game a little bit in as far as the African continent is concerned. I like the fact that they are talking about it, but let's increase. Let's not only focus on Angola and Nigeria. Linked to that, if it happens that internationally the situation becomes okay and we don't have problems of airlines collapsing, it will be important as part of our scenario going forward of aggressive mobilization of tourists to South Africa. It will be important to always emphasize that because SAT and tourism will not have sufficient capital to go all over the world for marketing, it's important to have a very strong link with the Department of International Relations. Very important for us to use all the embassies in the world and make sure that the Department of Tourism speaks to the Department of International Relations so that even in their APP and their strategic plan, they can have an indication where they are working with the Department of Tourism and SAT so that we can use our embassies in the world to aggressively push our marketing agenda internationally. I support members who are saying the grading of establishment must be free and there must be incentives that are going to ensure that people can voluntarily make sure that they get into grading application. Now, what I want to suggest, honorable members, to the minister and SAT is that because there's a white paper process coming, we must suggest to the department that let that white paper process take into account this grading, and both SAT and the department can then suggest on how they think they can take over the responsibility for grading, because you understand the dynamics of South African society better, particularly our people who are in poverty, who are affected by inequality, and who are affected by unemployment, who are women, who are youth, who are in the villages, in the townships and the small towns where poverty is highly prevalent. I also want to suggest, Minister, I know you have been dealing with this, and I want to suggest that it must continue to be your verse, your song and everything until your term ends in 2024. We must continue to streamline deliberately funding for Black people in general and Africans in particular, without compromising the long-term strategic goal of building a non-racial South Africa. Because to build a non-racial South Africa, you need the empowerment of Black people, of Africans, so that they can be on par. And because Africans and Blacks do not have access to financial capital, to the resources, to the assets, to immovable assets, we must make sure that always we motivate for them to be supported financially, because you don't have enough resources within tourism to help them. What we have in tourism is minute. So we'll have to say in the Department of Economic Development, in the Department of Small Business and so on, how do we make sure that there is collaboration and coordination of resources, push the banks to come on board and the development finance institutions to deliberately finance people who are based in the areas where there is poverty. The last point I want to raise is on transformation. As a committee, we have agreed that transformation is shocking in terms of speed in the tourism industry in South Africa. We have agreed that September this year, we are going to be releasing a report on the extent to which the tourism sector has untransformed or transformed. We will like SAT, and you know you are reliable partners together with the department, for us as a tripartite, ourselves as a committee, the department and SAT and everybody else, to say, let us all aggressively push transformation, because we can't delay the construction of a non-racial, non-sexist, prosperous society. And we can only do that if we are going to aggressively and radically, consistently drive transformation and make sure that in the course of us driving transformation, we allay the fears of those who think that transformation is about pushing them to the periphery. So it will be important to consistently communicate a message that says, transformation is not about pushing white people to the periphery of the economy, but it's about making sure that Black people, Africans, who were sidelined for over 400 years, they also come back and we join hands and we build this South Africa that we say we want to build, that is united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and prosperous. We can only achieve that if all of us, we can then get on board and we stop the quibbling. When the minister comes up with issues that are trying to push transformation, we run to the courts. I will urge us, honorable members, that when issues of transformation are raised, let's rather sit on the table and say, how do we implement this such that there will not be some sections of society in South Africa that will think that transformation is happening at their expense, but they will understand that transformation is happening for the benefit of all South Africans in order to achieve a non-racial South Africa. In case I get cut again, you'll continue, Member Makhubela. I'm giving over to you, Minister, Deputy Minister, the CEO, Ntate Nchona, the chairperson in transition, of SA Tourism Board to proceed. Thank you, Member Makhubela.
Minister and your team.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and honorable members. I'm going to allow first the team of the executive, together with the board, to respond, and myself and DM will come at the end just to close on the matters. There are quite a number of issues that relate to the work of the department and some of the issues that we dealt with yesterday that have come back, and some of the work around regulations and all that. I'll deal with that just to take members through, Chairperson. So let me allow the executive and the board to deal with matters within their ambit, and then I'll come back together with DM. Sisa and Tim.
Yes, thank you, Minister. Thank you, honorable members. Certainly a full suite of questions and thoughts there, which we really appreciate. As I said earlier on, I'm accompanied by the executive team, and I'm just going to ask them to quickly go through the elements.
Sorry, how long do we have in responding? I remember yesterday you gave us time so that we can time ourselves, Chair. How long do we have in responding?
Minister, you have up until 20 to 9. So that will be 2040.
Okay. It's 2019 now. Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, CEO.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, honorable members. Team, just please note we are under a very tight timeline over there.
Yeah,
so
Minister and the team, you've got until 5 minutes to 9. It's now 20:08.
Okay, we will take that one. Thank you, Chair. Let me pass over to the team, please. 5 minutes each, so that we can move quickly and then give the board to wrap up and the minister as well.
Okay, let's do this way. Shall we ask Daryl to start on grading issues so that we are easy to move?
Thank you, Minister. Good evening, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, and thank you for the opportunity. There are a couple of questions. I think there's one that I maybe need some clarity on from Honourable
Yeah, we gave two different, yes.
Sorry, can you hear me, Chair?
Chairperson?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was looking at a different watch.
Okay.
Okay. I'll continue. So I just wanted some clarity on the question that came from Honorable Brautersev. The first one specifically relating to the certification and the issuance of certificates for essential services provision. You know, that's not handled by South African Tourism or the grading entity. It's handled by CIPC, which is a unit of the Department of Trade and Industry. So, and we have communicated that
regulation issues and the issues around COVID-19, I shall deal with them.
Okay, perfect. Then I'll just deal with the one question then from Honorable De Freitas, which was relating to the costs. And I think it's widely recognized and acknowledged that, you know, post this COVID period, many of the properties that are going to be still in business are going to have challenges with cash flow. And just to acknowledge that we are engaging the department, we have got an agreement with the department in the form of the Tourism Incentive Program, which allows for quite significant discounts on grading fees. And we are in discussions with the department and specifically the DG on how we can increase that to allow for even greater discount and hopefully 100% discount at the point of the next assessment for our members. And I'll leave the rest. I think the rest, Minister, are largely linked to the work that you're going to talk about later on. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl, and much appreciated. Can I then ask the Chief Operating Officer, Stay, to come in, and then the CFO, and then the Chief Marketing Officer to wrap up?
Thank you, CEO. Evening, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. There was a question around the digital transformation as to the cost to transform the entity and whether it would affect the staff. I think one of the key programs that we'll be running is to look at South African tourism's operating model to ensure that we respond adequately to the changes that are happening right now. So we have started looking at what would be the impact of our digital transformation to our international operations. We are now doing the analysis of the financial implications or the investment that we make and our operation costs, looking at what would be an optimal way of servicing these markets. Right now, I don't think we're at the stage where we can say it will affect the staff complement. However, we see a certain integration or a consolidation of services. We will be able to come back to the committee to just give a sense of what would be the impact of digital transformation to the staff complement. We are looking more on starting with the support services so that we ensure that we reduce the operating costs in market and look for a far more efficient way of running our business. The other question that CEO I would like to deal with, Honorable Chair, was whether we have an M&E tool to ensure that we monitor and evaluate the work that we do to ensure that we do deliver the targets that have been set on the APP. One of the things that we are doing is we are reviewing the capability that we need in terms of looking at M&E. But we do have a function that we have now created to look at enterprise planning and reporting to ensure that on a quarterly basis, we look at implementation of the APP. But the most important thing that I need to mention is that we're moving towards creating an enterprise program management capability so that every work that is contained in the APP is projectized to ensure that we can track these things and we can report adequately. On the question around what appraisal system we are using, we use Oracle as a system that assists us. So what it clearly does for us is following the approval of the APP, we take this and each individual performance contract comes from the KPIs that are set on the APP. We have a remuneration policy that has been approved by the Minister of Tourism in concurrence with Minister of Finance So we follow that for now, but we do anticipate, however, that with the repurposing of the institution, we would look at policy reviews or policies that relate to performance to ensure that obviously individual performance is aligned to that of the organization. There was also a question around digital marketing, which I would leave to the CMO to deal with. I think that's it, Chair, that I would cover for now. Thanks.
Thank you, COO. Can I ask the Chief Financial Officer to pick up any questions there, and then we'll close off with the Chief Marketing Officer.
Thank you, CEO. Good evening, honorable members. I'll deal with the question regarding consultancy fees or how much we plan to outsource in the current financial year. So globally, we've limited our outsourced services from a marketing perspective to 9% of our total budget. So it's approximately 35 million, which is included in the 438 million rand total budget. And then from an IT support and maintenance perspective, outsourced services, that accounts to 5% of the total budget. So in total, or consolidated view is 14% of the total funding relates to outsourced services. I'll hand over to the CMO.
TK, over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you, honorable members. The issue around digital marketing, there was a comprehensive strategy that we presented, which has been approved by the board, which is to shift the entire marketing focus, not just in terms of the way we operate internally, but to shift the entire marketing focus from classical advertising-driven marketing onto digital marketing. So what we're focusing on now is not classical advertising, but focusing on content that is distributed directly to audiences, that is very highly targeted, which makes it both cost efficient and also makes it very measurable in terms of the return on investment, because when it's distributed within a digital channel, you can actually monitor the responsiveness of each piece of content that you put out. This also means the integration of all our platforms internationally and consolidating our accounts, because every time you use a third party to buy digital media or any other platform, the reporting goes to that third party supplier, which makes it very difficult for you to be able to measure. So what we are doing is consolidating all our accounts inside South African tourism so that we're able to actually measure and control our spend effectively. So that is on the marketing side. In terms of the agency capability, which is part of the question that the CFO has just answered now, we have moved to a model where we're building the capacity for marketing internally. We were unable to find an appropriate window of time because we were always constantly executing externally. So within this window, as the CEO has pointed out, it has given us an opportunity to focus internally in building internal marketing capability. That has also given us the opportunity to reduce the reliance on external suppliers. So we have moved into a model where we've offloaded a lot of our external suppliers and taken that work internally. And as we go forward, we'll be able to report on the financial implications of that. But we are now really taking on board internally all the marketing effort and reducing reliance on external suppliers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, TK, our Chief Marketing Officer. I'm just going to ask Amanda from the Conventions Bureau. Is there anything that you want to add before I pick up?
Thank you so much, Minister, Chairperson, honourable members. There's not really. I think one of the important things is that we are really wanting to focus on as the CEO said, on the national meetings to assist
and see how we can build capacity in the smaller places and not and really drill down even further than secondary cities. And I think the most important thing is, and that was also one of the questions or comments of one of our members, is that we are in contact in this regard with our provincial tourism authorities and specifically convention bureaus then in the provinces. So that for us is a strategy that we really want to work together and collectively to ensure that we get our smaller places or our smaller towns also ready for hosting conferences. Thank you so much, CEO.
Thank you very much. Let me just wrap up a couple of key ones that are actually outstanding. I think I just want to thank the honourable members for their questions as well. It shows a very high level of engagement, which we appreciate all the time. There was a question around SADC. Absolutely, it forms an important market for us. Africa, actually, as a continent, pre-COVID, comprised 76% of our total arrivals, into the country. So therefore, it is a space that we're watching quite closely. But again, it all depends on the policy side as to when our borders get lifted and what the process is for lifting up of those activities that allow movement to occur. Certainly, just looking around the world, the recovery has been led by people gaining confidence first. People want to drive 2-3 hours before they use other modes of transport. There's a focus of questions around domestic tourism, very, very important. And I think this is not only a realization from SA Tourism, but also from the industry as well. Because for a very long time, the private sector who owns the products, who delivers the service, who actually drive tourism themselves, have been focusing on the hard currency, the euros, the dollars, and the pounds. And the problem that is there's a concentration risk. When that market closes off, there is no other markets there. You are seeing right now a lot of the trade repurposing themselves and looking as to how then do they come at an appropriate price point, for the domestic market, because domestic is with us for eternity, and the unknown is when the borders will open. But what is known is the domestic to start off on that side. There was a question around now about how we're going to choose which markets we go to, essentially because we can't go to all the markets around the world. And what drives us is I spoke about a tool called the Market Investment Framework, and it's a data-led decision, kind of methodology that helps us to look at each country on different factors. Number one, do we have direct airline connectivity? Do the people, what's the GDP looking at there? Can they spend? What are the barriers to entry? Do they need visas to travel to South Africa? And each element is actually factored so that you can come up with a score that gives you a sense in terms of these should be your top markets. But it also needs to be dynamic because we live in an environment that is very, very fluid. Things can change tomorrow. So therefore, the framework needs to be adaptable. And that's the part that we're working on, the adaptability part, so that when there are external factors changing, it also adapts accordingly. And we need to have the agility as an organization to deploy or redeploy resources or attention based on where the opportunities are at as well. Collaboration across the board. I mean, agritourism is such a big element and an opportunity for us in a COVID environment where people are going to be looking for spaces, where people are going to be looking for, the outdoors. We have such a huge competitive advantage there, and it is in how we package all of these that is essentially going to be, going forward. So the smaller establishments, the rural establishments are actually the flavor of the day. So we are always listening in as to what the consumer needs. However, this is changing on a regular basis. So we are keeping up to speed as to how we go about those. The element around quarantine sites and the stigma that is there. You're absolutely right. We are keeping an eye on to make sure that we reprofile those brave establishments that put up their hand and actually celebrate them as first heroes, as opposed to being tarnished as a quarantine site. So we're even looking at the name in itself. Quarantine sounds very medical, if I put it that way, but we need to start to change how we view those two heroes two being those first line movers and actually part of the solution towards how South Africa is handling the pandemic as well. Similarly to this, there is also an important element that we are always listening to, because at the first elements of lockdown, there was a bit of resistance against the sector because it was seen that it was tourists that were bringing in the virus to South Africa. It was important to them, right? And again, we don't want to end up in a situation whereby when we open up again, there is a pushback from broader society, because when they see a tourist, they see a virus carrier and. So again, those important messaging, and those go beyond just SA tourism carried by us, but we are looking at aligning with our partners, Brand SA, and also DIRCO as an example there. What are the other one is what are some of the main findings of the webinars? Very broad-based, and I think some of the key things. You got a sense of the stress levels. People are looking for certainty, right? As to when, what does it mean? How does it happen? When can I operate again? What are some of the restrictions? The second one came through around technology, right? And a lot of them came through to saying, let's see how we can use technology to deliver our service better, faster, from that perspective. So that we're working on a solution together with industry on the technology part. Then also the other one that came through was the high cost of doing business in tourism through intermediaries, right? So all these booking platforms that take anything between 10 and 30% commission. So they make more money than the actual establishments themselves. But because they got the power of the booking platform, they're able to charge on these commissions. And a lot of them are actually overseas based. So essentially, these commissions are paid in dollars and euros and pounds and then converted backwards. Again, it's about how does SA Tourism get closer to the solution, become part of actually developing local booking systems for the local environment, right? So that when you start talking about the value add of grading, if you are graded, imagine having a booking system that you automatically comes through there. So those are the technology plays that we are looking at quite deeply from that side. Around some of the timelines that were brought through is, I just want to reiterate that part of our process of engaging the sector was to look at various scenarios so that we can get feedback. And, in terms of the industry engagements, the webinars that we had over there, the timelines were never ever set in place. It was very clear, even if you're part of the webinar, we said that the timelines are there to actually initiate conversation, but it's not actually a hard and fast one. There are various scenarios we propose as what we call the high road. If a vaccine is found tomorrow, the shape of the curve changes. If we mess up as a country around a recovery, the shape of the curve becomes something totally different. What is certain is that tourism kicks in at certain levels. What we don't know is when and how quickly we get to those levels. And I think that's where the fluidity of the situation comes in from that side. So it was a process of engagement as opposed to a definitive kind of view on that side. And then lastly is, you're absolutely right. When the sector opens, there's going to be so much noise from so many destinations, and we are already seeing destinations that are virtually paying people to travel to their own countries, as an example, by offering to pay off their airline fees or even hotel fees. It's not sustainable, obviously, but I think these are some of the knee-jerk reactions from countries that have a huge reliance on tourism. We are looking at that all the time to find that sweet spot. We're also seeing globally what we're seeing bubbles or green corridors, as it were, where countries such as Australia and New Zealand decide to actually travel to each other because they can contain, they have confidence in each other's way in terms of how they handle the pandemic. You're starting to see some corridors opening up in Europe as well, right? The key thing to note over there is proximity. So you can't really have a corridor that's a 10-hour flight away. Right, so we've got to look around us if we're going to follow the same methodology, right, within SADC. Who do we have confidence to open up line-to-line borders with? And that's a bigger policy discussion, basically. But I think we are watching those and keeping close to them. Lastly is TOMSA levies. Very, very few percentage of the industry itself actually participates in TOMSA levies. part of this now has actually exposed those businesses to say they don't have a voice because they don't belong to a collective. By being part of the TOMSA levies, they're being part of the solutions as well. It's also in our interest, as I say, tourism, when we look at our own sustainability. At the moment, we receive something 10% of our budget comes from TOMSA levies. We would like to see that grow quite significantly as well. So together with the Tourism Business Council, we are looking at how we repackage that TOMSA level to make it value add so that it becomes a natural flow where people start to collect that and we can start to rebalance our revenue side of our budget. I think with those words, I just want to thank you. I know I've not done justice to some of the questions, but we do take them to heart, and I really appreciate the opportunity for us to table our APP. I'm now going to pass back to the chair of the board, interim chair of the board, and other board members, and then ultimately to the ministers with something to add.
We have less than 10 minutes, actually. Is it? Yeah. To finalize, I would like to maybe ask the board to respond and give to the DM, because we do have DM on the line as well. So if the board could be mindful of that the DM has not spoken, so he needs to come in.
Minister, in the interest of time, I think that the CEO and the EXCO have covered everything. Again, just from a board point of view, it's another valuable interaction with the portfolio committee, and I think we've again got lots of notes. So I think we're happy to pass on to the DM and yourself to finish off.
Over to you, DM.
No, thanks, Minister, and greetings to the chair and the members of the committee, the interim chair of the board, the CEO. While in the interest of time, I'll also be just brief touch on one matter around the issue that the chair has raised in terms of the importance of domestic tourism and the process of the acceleration of transformation with particular focus on ownership as well as product diversification, by making sure that we unlock some of the products that have not been accessible to our people or has not been properly marketed. We agree that domestic tourism is very key in driving the process of tourism, especially post COVID-19, because it is the one that will provide us with the immediate source of relief in the industry, and therefore focusing on domestic tourism therefore becomes very central and key in that way, because domestic tourism, we believe it has got a potential to drive the economic growth and create job opportunities for our people. And therefore, in this context, we have to agree with members that we need to work very closely with municipalities in the context of the district model to ensure that there is provision of infrastructure to those tourist destinations and attractions, and also ensure that it is affordable basic services, especially to SMEs, so that they are able, therefore, to provide the service and be cost effective in that way. It is in this context that we agree that we need to support the issue of domestic tourism and work around in mobilizing our local to travel and create easy opportunities for them, that so that we're able to make sure that when they wish to travel, it becomes easy for them. So, but also focus on the SADC region and also into the Africa, because those are the ones that will come into the market quicker than the international one. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, DM. Chair, I'm going to respond to the issues that relate to the regulation. Honorable Tim raised quite a number of issues. I think indeed I do agree it's communication, Honorable Tim. What the establishment needs to do is to write to the Department of Tourism to operate. The person who's the contact person currently is the PLO of the Minister of Tourism, which is Paul Masemola, or even the website. In terms of our website, there is a call center email address that the establishment can send so that we can apply, and then the Minister of Tourism issues the letter for the establishment to operate. What they need to do is to be able to get the people who are coming to stay to have permits so that they are able to operate. So there isn't a need to even go to CPIC for the accommodation establishments. It's directly with the Department of Tourism. I hope it does assist. So no reference number required, nothing. Just an application through the department. The department then will ask you to say, who is coming to stay with you? To the people. And then you indicate these are the people who wants to book, and then we do the reference checking. If, let's say, it's a company, I'm going to make an example, a retail that the manager is coming to stay there and they're permitted service, then we'll verify if that person works there. We need a verification, and then they do that, and then it's issued. The letters are issued within 24 hours. That has been the turnaround time. So no long time. Maybe that's why there's been a challenge, because the member is gone. And what I can commit, Chair, is that with level 3, what we'll do, we'll send through the portfolio committee and the select committee the guidelines that can be circulated to all members, so that members of the committee knows what is expected and what is can be done. So I hope that will assist, Chair, in terms of our process. So that's the first thing. The second one, Chair, I want to speak to, also it relates to the issues of, I think, the guidelines in terms of what is happening in the sector to operate. Level 3, I did share yesterday with the committee what can operate in level 3. I think we can make it in writing as well, so that we send it to members so that they can do reference check in case they've forgotten. I do note that some of the members were not able to join yesterday, and therefore it could be a challenge with that. That's the other thing. Around the issue of those who are 60 and above not allowed, it's not true. Even if you are 60 and above, if you are an essential service, remember, or permitted service, remember the regulation says you are advised. We can't enforce you to not to work. So if they are within the permitted services, then they can go and stay in a hotel with that certificate. So that is still allowed, Chair. I'm just responding to the issue of Honorable Sithole that raised around the regulation as well. We do a lot of work between ourselves and the provinces. We hold regular. We had our MINMEC last week, where we were engaging with the provinces, and through the provinces are engaging with the municipalities to ensure that there's a seamless work through, because it will be practically impossible for the minister to interact with every municipality. So what we do MINMEC. In the MINMEC, we have SALGA representatives who sit through, and then they take information to circulate through their municipalities, but also provincial leadership. They sit, the CEOs of Provincial Tourism Board sit in the MINMEC. They carry the information to be able to distribute through. So throughout, we've been able to update members of the MINMEC in terms of what is happening, where we are, and all those issues. Around the issue of restaurant, in terms of the discussion currently, it's discussion that they are looking for sit down. Discussions are not yet concluded, but currently as level 3 states, it's pickup, it's delivery, and it's drive-through. Not yet allowed in terms of those restaurants for sit down. The other issue in terms of TOMSA levy, Minister Mboweni has started a process around the whole issue of taxation and levies in the tourism sector. We made a submission. We have agreed that we'll conclude it before the next financial and the next budget process starts. So it's work in progress. We are guided by National Treasury because they've taken over the process. So we'll hear from them what are the proposals, what is accepted. What has been raised as a concern from Treasury was that it seems that members of the sector put money into a tiki and they go and still take the money out of the tiki and use it. This was discussed with members of the sector, and I said, we need to find a mechanism to be able to, the fact that when you put the levies can be used by both in terms of that, and the monitoring thereof is not done by an independent. So there were issues around that, how it's utilized and all that. So there is a lot of work that Treasury is doing. We are engaging with them to try and make sure that we can have a system that is credible and a system that can be accepted. Chair, you raised quite a number of issues. Maybe before I come to you, let me deal with the issues raised by Honorable Muteka. Honorable Muteka, we've not ignored the committee. I want to re-emphasize. Maybe the issue could be that we didn't say this is specifically the small authorities. But if you look in terms of the department's APP that we presented yesterday, quite an extensive work that we have put in there. It's literally in the small villages. It's literally in the rural areas. If we can look in terms of infrastructure development, our programs are definitely in line with what the committee has said. And this also speaks to what Honorable Matebula was saying. And I do take that Honorable Matebula was not here yesterday, so we would not have been able to hear what we presented yesterday and the challenges of technology. But if you look at our APP as the department, the liberation routes that we are doing, the museums that we are focusing on are not in urban areas, are literally in the small areas in town where people can be able to say, this is our heritage, this is our tourism, and they can benefit. The work that we do in EPWP with infrastructure in communities, that is in rural areas, Chairperson. I know my time is up. Just to indicate, Chair, yes, indeed, the issue of grading broadly, we've agreed that is going to be part of the review process. We are reviewing the entire grading system. And as we presented yesterday, that the grading policy will be reviewed together with all the policies and will come through to say this is what the grading of the future will be as the department. And that is within this financial year. Thank you very much, Chair. And that goes with the transformation part. And I'm happy, Chair, will be able to share even the work that we are doing around transformation. And the report that has been produced, I think it's been there, but also looking forward to what the committee will produce in September. We'll work together, we'll be partners in that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Chairperson, SOR. With the difficulties of connectivity on the chairperson side, honorable members, allow me to thank you for your participation in the deliberation in this portfolio committee where we're looking into the APP of the entity, our only entity that we have, South African Tourism. Or chairperson? Chairperson, yes, we can hear you.
Can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Chairperson.
All right. Thank you very much, Minister, Deputy Minister, and your collective. The collective of the South African Tourism Board, led by the Chairperson in transition and the CEO. Thanks for the presentation. Minister, we are very happy that we have asked for this issue of grading to be attended to. We have addressed that particular matter. We have asked for domestic tourism to be prioritized and intensified in the context of COVID-19. We have addressed that particular matter. We have asked for collaboration between South Africa and other countries in the world to mitigate risk around issues of traveling for tourism. We are happy with the feedback. Around the comfort, the safety of tourists and so on, we're also happy with the feedback. We also know, Minister, that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. So the district model, which is going to accommodate the committee's approach of villages, of townships, of small dorpies, and the fact that you went overboard and added other villages which include liberation heritage routes. We applaud you for that because we know the extent to which the budget of the department is constrained and the extent to which under COVID-19, the department had to make sure that it lets go some of the parts of the budget because of the challenges that we face. Honorable members, we want to thank you for the robust, extensive, informative engagements for today with SA Tourism. Yesterday we said the picture will be complete today. I suppose the picture is now complete in as far as APP is concerned and the strategic plan, and how there's going to be general reinvigoration and repositioning of tourism post-COVID-19 to reignite the South African economy in order to create jobs, to deal with unemployment, to deal with problems of inequality. And thanks for always, Minister, when we say come, you come. The board for saying when you say come, you come. When you say when prepare, when change, you change. When you don't agree with us, you indicate to us with facts, with scientific facts to say, here I don't agree, here I agree. There is general consensus. We want to thank our members in the NCOP, in the Select Committee, for the robust engagement. We wish our honorable member, also in the NCOP, the chair, a speedy recovery. I spoke to him before we started. He says he thinks in the next 2-3 days, he'll be up and running. Honorable Makubela, always thank you very much. You know, I'm in a 1G infrastructure area. You are in 4G. So when I experience problems, you take over. Honorable
Thank you,
members,
Chair.
I wish you a good night. Enjoy your night and good luck for the weekend. Minister, good luck with the Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much.
Some werk, some trek.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.